All right. Do you hear me? Yeah. So thank you. While we do the transfer, thank you to my colleagues for this. Well, it's quite exciting to be here on this panel today. So really, I appreciate the opportunity. But without further ado, I'd like just to invite Deputy Minister Jan Hargaš on the stage. He is live now to open this panel with a statement. Deputy Minister, do you hear me? You were unmuted briefly, but you're remuted. There you go.
I can hear you, and hopefully it's the same way the other way.
Wonderful. We can hear you as well. You wanted to say a few words for us to kickstart this conversation. Please.
Well, first of all, thank you. I'm sorry. Did I jump in too soon?
Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, very warm thanks for the invitation, and very sincere apologies for not being able to be with you in person due to other pressing issues. But fortunately, I have the opportunity to talk to you this way, and my colleague Juraj Čorba from our ministry will represent the views of our ministry and of Slovakia in this discussion panel. So first of all, allow me to support the activities of the Future Society and the Athens Roundtable. I'm really grateful for the invitation, and personally I'm honored that we are taking part in this extremely important event. As we all know, the enforcement and governance of the EU AI Act represents one of the biggest challenges of the EU digital decade. I would say not only AI Act, but also the other acts that will govern the digital ecosystem in the future. During the negotiations about the AI Act in the Council, Slovakia took these practical issues as a priority, and we are glad that the respective presidencies and the member states were inspired by some of our ideas, non-papers and workshops. To be able to understand and act in this complex field, we, the member states and the EU institutions, need to place ourselves firmly in the cyberspace. We also need to ensure that we cooperate closely with our global partners. I'm reaching to you today from Bratislava, the city of the mechanical Turk. The historical legacy of the famed 18th century chess-playing automaton designed by Wolfgang von Kempelen perhaps invites us to reflect. Von Kempelen, an outstanding inventor in many fields, left us a curious message. We need to make sure that we are not deluded by a thinking technology. But not only that, we also need to appreciate and properly understand the role and behavior of humans handling the technology. I believe that we, Europeans, have managed to invent, or at least to improve, some of the most delicate institutional and regulatory responses to pressing societal challenges. Double entry bookkeeping, separation of powers, stock exchange, central banking, rules of conflict of laws, modern constitutional courts, and multi-tier supranational governance of markets and supervision of financial worlds. All of these innovative institutional and regulatory solutions invite us to be both imaginative and demanding of ourselves as we design public institutions for AI. At the end of the day, AI governance is globally becoming an important competitive differentiator and a key factor for stability of our societies. So I will leave you with these thoughts and the ambition that we should put in front of ourselves. And saying that, I wish you a successful discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. That's very interesting remarks. Really appreciate that you could make the time to comment and to kickstart this important conversation. As you say, I mean, the enforcement of the AI Act is important, right? Without enforcement, the AI Act is just words on paper. It is worse than that. It's actually it's a broken promise to the citizens of the EU if you just come up with a law that in the end you are not going to enforce. So it is an important topic, and I'm really glad that today to to talk about this. I have such a stellar lineup of speakers, all bringing different perspectives that are, in my opinion, very relevant based on the research we have done at the Future Society. This is really like the perspectives that are shaping the current debate. So, of course, there is Eva Kaili with me today. Vice President of the AP. Thank you, Vice President Kaili, for being with us. As you mentioned earlier, yes, you are Vice President responsible for ICT, but also for the foresight community, the ESPAS community, so the European Strategy and Policy Analysis system of the EU institutions, as well as like the panel on the future of science and technology. So very relevant to have your perspective. Welcome. Really appreciate that you join us on this panel. Eva Maydell, MEP Maydell was still is the rapporteur on the AI Act on the ITRE committee, so the Committee for Industry, Research and Technology. And this is the committee that has published already early on a report about like the AI Act, which has a lot of good ideas about the enforcement of the act, or at least like asking good questions and stimulating good discussions. Thank you, Ms. Maydell, for joining us. So, of course, Deputy Minister Jan Hargaš was not able to come in person, but he has delegated his expert in digital governance and from Slovakia, Juraj Čorba. Thank you very much as a governance expert from the Ministry of Investment, Regional Development and Informatization, and also the point person in Slovakia to discuss the AI Act. So welcome, Juraj. Thank you so much. Katherine Forrest is joining us as well at the end of this long panel, I must say. So Katherine Forrest is a former U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of the NYC, the New York City, and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Antitrust Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. So given the number of trials that Katherine Forrest has done on the topic, she's a real leader in laws and technology, and notably laws and artificial intelligence. So really thank you for coming all the way over here to discuss with us. And finally, we are joined also by Werner Stengg, digital expert in the cabinet of the Vice President Vestager, and also in charge of this file, overseeing this file that is the AI Act. So really, thank you very much for joining today. I will kickstart a poll with the help of the technical team that will be running throughout the panel. We will over the next 20 minutes, we will start the conversation, but for the second half of the panel, we will inform ourselves of the answers to this poll. So the question for the live audience, the online audience, sorry, is to tell us, among the list of mechanisms that you see on your screen right now, which I will list them out, what is the most crucial element for proper enforcement of the AI Act? This is a fairly nerdy question, I take it, but it's an important one, and I'm curious to hear the views of the hundreds of people who are listening to us right now. So the mechanism listed for the people in person include strong EU-level coordination, European AI Board, investigative powers for EU or national authorities, internal and third-party audits of AI provider, risk classification with clear categories, direct complaint procedures for citizens, technical standardization, better tools for measuring and benchmarking AI, regulatory sandboxes, and finally, cooperative international enforcement. Of course, there are many more mechanisms, but obviously, we are already eating quite a lot into this, the meat of the debate. So I'm looking forward to kickstart this. So diving in now, I'm actually curious to understand more what's at stake with the enforcement of the AI Act. Will the rest of the world be affected by the EU AI Act? Will it be enforced abroad? The Commission has definitely worked hard to enforce these rules and to make sure that they export themselves abroad. Werner, what do you expect will be the international impact of the AI Act? And if there is an impact on industry abroad and on policy abroad, do you expect it to be complementary with other governance frameworks, like the OECD one?
Well, first of all, probably we should say that we started with Europe, right? When we started 3 years, actually it was exactly 3 years ago, the 1st of December, that this commission took office, and then we started discussing these issues also in the office of my boss. What does it mean, Europe fit for the digital age? And AI was one of the first things we actually did discuss because that was announced by the president as the first deliverable within 100 days. So we were scratching our head. So what is this? You know, what should we be doing? And it was not that we said, let's go and set a global standard, you know, fun. It was rather so let's make sure that AI is properly deployed and used in Europe, you know, and then comes, of course, all the considerations. What does this mean for the wider world, and so on and so forth. So we started out, of course, with the trust issue. You know, this technology that works for people is probably one of the sentences that you've heard most from my boss. But it's also not just the people, you know, human-centric. It's also it works for people. So we expect AI to do something for us. Yeah, it's not just that we regulate something, but we want AI to help us in getting better decisions everywhere, but we just want this to serve people first, right? So trust, values, all the rest of it. It's like Eva said, and I mean the Greek Eva now, we want it all, yeah? We want safety, we want privacy, we want innovation, we want profit. So we want it all. That's our objective, right? Now, for our industry to start with, you know, we think that is feasible because we are creating something for 450 million people, where you hopefully have legal certainty, where you have trust in the technology, where you have a single market. But that's not just us. Everyone else can come to the European market if they meet the same requirement. You know, there's not a protectionist instrument. It just says, if you want to deploy and use AI in Europe, that is the rule book. But that means that for anyone else that develops the technology that meets the requirements of the AI Act, has a large market to test and use those technologies. The second aspect is, of course, that we have not invented something in isolation from all the other discussions that you mentioned, right? I mean, also as Eva has said, this was already discussed in the OECD and elsewhere for a long time. We tend to agree that we want trustworthy AI. We tend to agree what it takes to have trustworthy AI, so the principles and the mitigation measures. Now what we're discussing, both with the Americans in the TTC, but also in the global sphere, is how can we actually do that? Right now, almost doesn't matter whether we in Europe say it's a legal requirement for those use cases, or whether somewhere else in America or elsewhere you say we want those AI systems to meet certain standards. We're discussing now with everyone how this can be done practically. How can we comply with those principles? How can we enforce those principles? So I think that a lot of win-win in the global debate. So there will probably at the end of the day, hopefully, be global standards agreed in a way by like-minded nations across the globe. But that was not our starting point, but hopefully it will be our end point.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. I already would want to dive into this, but like I'm curious to actually hear like the perspective from the only American in the first finishing and introducing you to ask the question because it seems like. Sorry about that. So yeah, Ms. Forrest, actually, like as in with your experience in the practice, the adjudication, but also the policy. Like, do you expect the AI Act will affect practice policies and adjudication in the US? Like, it's very interesting to have your perspective on this.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. Absolutely, it will affect the United States. I think that what we're going to see, however, is a complicated situation, as we did with the GDPR. And with the GDPR, there really was a Brussels effect, where the GDPR became a standard which now multinational companies and any companies who are doing work that in a variety of ways impacts the United States has caused companies to comply. And we'll see that. We'll see contractual arrangements that will then come into play. There'll be contracts within the United States, and then there can be some enforcement of contracts for breaches of those contracts within the United States. So we'll see conformance in a GDPR kind of way. We'll see contractual arrangements. But then the question, I think, ultimately is whether or not the United States itself is going to follow, and whether or not there'll be any kind of similar set of regulations. That's a complicated question that will be dealt with by a variety of governmental entities. But let me just posit for a moment some of the complexities. One of the complexities is that there's a bias in the United States towards having adaptability of existing law. That existing law, for instance, anti-discrimination law, constitutional law, which governs surveillance, a variety of laws governing credit and lending policies and procedures, that those laws be flexible and be able to adapt to new technologies rather than there be an additional layer of regulation on top. So that's just a bias. But there are new regulations all the time. Clearly there are, and there are efforts currently being undertaken in virtually, not all, but virtually every state in the United States, as well as at the federal level and at municipal levels. So there's an additional complexity. You've got the bias towards the existing law, but then you've got this fragmented system where a lot of folks are trying to implement a lot and look at the way in which the particular issues that affect their constituencies should be implemented in their areas. So getting those laws to be preempted, if you will, by a different kind of overlay is going to be a challenge. There's another challenge, which is that we don't really know right now what we're going to be regulating. That the kind of AI that we have today is not the AI we're going to have tomorrow. In a way, I think about much of the algorithmic work that I was doing a couple of years ago, and now I'm involved in neural networks. And the neural network issues are entirely different from some of the earlier algorithmic machine learning types that were sort of easier. And the neural networks are multidimensional and nonlinear in nature. And so those are quite complicated. So we don't know what we're going to be regulating. So there's an expense involved in implementing regulation. There's a desire not to inhibit innovation. I take Vice President's point about profit in America. That's certainly a motivation for many companies. I would venture to say worldwide, but certainly in my country. But there's a desire for innovation, and innovation to have a kind of a life and an ability to grow. And the care with which we've got to then ensure that whatever regulatory overlay we put on top of it doesn't squash that is very, very important. So we will see the United States that that Europe is ahead of us in terms of a comprehensive set of regimes. We know from our Bill of Rights that was recently put out that is 5 essential principles. The principles, I would venture to say, are aligned, but you have much more depth and criteria. But whether or not we can get there as a whole, I think there are some real challenges, if that answers your questions.
It does. Thank you so much. And actually, you made me think of like when mentioning this neural network, this nascent field that like 2 years ago was nowhere, of like AI forensics, which is becoming something that will be necessary to understand whether you have complied or not, or whether you have violated some existing legislation or not. So yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
And could I just make one more comment on that, and then I'll pass the floor, which is one of the very important, I think, aspects of the AIA here in Europe is that there's a very extensive set of vendors who are required for the implementation, the successful implementation of it, and skill sets that are required, which means that there's going to have to be some top technology talent that's going to have to go into public facing, or at least not necessarily the highest paid private companies, in order to ensure compliance, or it's not going to work. And so I think that is another, the resource challenges, I think, are real. And those would be both for the United States as well as for Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have actually, I think in Brussels, those who are familiar, we have already seen some poaching on the antitrust side from digital enforcers to digital regulated entities. So let's actually dive in. This is one of the concrete, like, nitty-gritty implications, by the way, the poaching. But like, let's explore potential challenges and opportunities for enforcing AI laws. And I'd like to turn to you, Juraj, because you know, the council has basically finished its compromise text, right? Congratulations on that. We know that Slovakia has worked really hard on the questions of enforcement. This is like something that it's important to discuss. Like you have brought forward multiple like improvements or suggestions for improvements to the text, from like going to the single supervisory mechanism architecture for AI, or the EU level co-regulatory dialogue. Can you outline some of these ideas for the audience here? And from a member state's perspective, like how can we ensure the EU AI Act is properly enforced? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, and thank you very much for having me here at the table. It's a great honor for my country, for Slovakia, and for me personally to be here with such distinguished guests at the table. Indeed, I may start with your second question first. For the member states, this might be one of the biggest challenges of the decade, at least of the digital decade, as we call it. To bring these rules that we are now legislating in the Council and in the European Parliament into practice, that will be indeed a major task for all of us involved. And it's very important that we think about these challenges and about these people who will be put in charge of application of these rules in advance. And as Madam Forrest has already mentioned, the capacities, especially the human ones, are scarce. And that's, of course, a big problem for a mid-sized country, as Slovakia is. And it may be a major challenge even for bigger countries to make sure that we bring the right competent people to work for the public authorities that will be put in charge. So indeed, it will be a major challenge, and we also need to make sure from the member state perspective that all the tasks and obligations that we take onto ourselves are compatible with any other obligations that we intend to enter into globally or regionally. So it's extremely important that today with us we have people from the Council of Europe, where another convention is being negotiated. I happen to be a delegate also to the Council of Europe. We have people from the OECD setting important standards, know-how, metrics, and so on. So as member states, we need to make sure that all that we take onto ourselves is actually compatible and working. And regards your first question, yes, indeed. We are thankful that the member states and the respective presidencies in the Council were inspired by some of our ideas. There's no time to go over them in detail, but we are very thankful. But still, there were many things that we were unable where we were unable to convince the colleagues in the Council, and we believe that still need we need to pay attention to these issues, because the practical issues are at the core of our discussions. There are still the trialogues with the European Parliament. We will wait eagerly how the European Parliament will go about the issue of governance and enforcement. But as you have mentioned, we felt that there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from the financial sector. There was a complete overhaul of the public oversight of the financial world after the financial crisis. A lot of work was done also in the EU. And in this world, we already have existing rules and existing supervisory authorities that oversee the use of algorithms. So we believe there is a lot of inspiration that we can draw from the experience that has already been evaluated, and it seems to be working. The single supervisory mechanism was created. Now, we believe that we need something similar for the AI field. not necessarily taking decisions on the EU level, which can be sensitive for the member states. We can leave the final decisions to be taken on the national level, but we need something like a joint team on the EU level, continuously supporting the national competent authorities on the go, in real time. Actually, we might be talking about milliseconds when we talk about AI systems. So a seamless kind of cooperation within the EU. That's something that we try to bring in into discussions. And some other ideas, the last one I will mention is the need to actually make sure that people who deal with AI are in close contact and cooperation with people who deal with the oversight of data, Internet of Things, cybersec, possibly other fields in the digital, like digital platforms. We need to see clearly that these things are being integrated on the market, and we need to respond to the trends also in the public sector accordingly.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Actually, like by mentioning this strong EU level, ad hoc support, you kind of foresee here the results of the poll, because even though it's extremely tight, it varies between like 6 to 12% of the vote. But like the top that comes up is the strong EU level coordination. So like you're already foreseeing that. But anyway, we'll dive into that later. Vice President Kaili, I want to follow up then, of course. Sorry.
I think first the rapporteur has to talk about AI.
As you, of course, like.
As I said, I was the boss, you know.
Exactly.
No, she made me sit. She made you ask me now.
That's all right. I mean, for sure, we can.
Basically, it's the point now that she has to respond to what we heard.
For sure. No, that makes sense totally. I'm curious to hear, like, Ms. Maydell, like as the rapporteur for the ITRE committee, like. The report you published in June, right, as a lot of aspects such as like regulatory sandboxes, benchmarking, the interoperability of concept at the global level, supply chain relationships, and all these aspects that are going to be key and nuanced. What is your impression of the discussions currently in the European Parliament? Does the ITRE report shape a bit like these discussions on enforcement? Are you satisfied with the situation?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Eva. Thank you to the Future Society. Thank you to the Athens Roundtable. I'm very happy. I will tell you, I was a little bit ignorant. And when I first got your invitation back in the summer, I was like, oh, that must be in Athens. It would be very difficult for me to go all the way to Athens. And then I realized it's actually in Brussels. And I said, well, fantastic. Thank you so much for having me over, because we indeed collaborate very well with Eva, and I think sometimes it's needed to have this cross-party collaboration in order to bring some of that regulation that could empower, hopefully, innovation as well, not just clear rules on safety and security for citizens. But going to your question, thank you for bringing in the ITRE report. Why is it important? Not just because we sit in ITRE with Eva, but I'm very proud because it got a very big support of 61 votes in favor and only 2 against. And this has helped me defend in the discussions with the other committees and the lead committees this strong competitiveness and strong innovation voice that we tried to bring forward from the ITRE perspective. But having said that, are there things that, worry me? Well, I mean, how do we get to an enforceable AI Act? I think we are trying to find the answers, and there's a number of ideas that are being discussed today. But currently the negotiations make me a little bit worried, I have to say. And I will give 2 reasons. Some of them were already mentioned. The first one is related to the classification of high-risk AI. In my own report, I call for high-risk cases in Annex 3 to be based on actual use cases and not entire sectors. What are we seeing right now in the negotiations is this tendency to basically over-include all sectors as high risk. And on top of that, to ask businesses to complete assessments or requirements that they basically simply are unable to. So this is the first worry that we still haven't overcome, and we do not have clarity what exactly the position of the Parliament will be. The second point is on standards and guidance for the industry. Once we do adopt our Parliament report and position, of course we'll go to the trialogues, but I am wondering what happens after that. How will companies make sense of this legislation, basically? And, you know, our future approach for me should rely on international standards to provide basically those feasible guidelines, those realistic guidelines. And this is why, you know, for me, it's important that we also discuss this sort of topics in international settings like the TTC. And I hope we'll be able to learn more concreteness on Monday with the AI roadmap. I hope that would be the case, because we are seeing that the US is developing their blueprint on AI, and they haven't even defined AI as so sector specific. And I think we would need to define it in the AI Act, but when it comes to enforcement, sector specific guidelines are absolutely key and important. So this is the second point. And the third point is very similar to what Juraj was saying, competences of the national authorities. If one looks at the AI report that came about a year or a year and a half ago from the National Commission on AI in the US, the first area that it focuses on is skills and preparedness, but not of the citizens, but of national authorities, basically. And this seems to be something that we just take for granted that is there, when actually it is not there at all. And we never even discuss it, at least from a Parliament perspective. We cannot simply just write something into existence. Just because there are some requirements on a paper doesn't mean they would magically be enforced in one way or another into the real world. So when I speak to member states, I understand that there is simply not this level of skills that is needed and competences to tackle all these horizontal issues of AI that we are trying to tackle here within the institutions. And this is why, for me, it's very important to focus on the high-risk cases and the ones that are truly high risk, so that we can have the most efficient use of those national resources, which are already so scarce and in some places probably even not existent. And so, yes, I think it will be important to lay the groundwork for an enforceable AI Act, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So these are my three main points, but of course we are still in the negotiation process. And certainly I can say a lot on sandboxes and definition, but perhaps I'll stop here.
No, thank you. And as we'll also hear a bit more for one of your points, like we'll hear on Monday with, and already today a bit when we see the Macron-Biden bilateral meeting, whether anything on digital is mentioned there. But yeah, so that's interesting. So not as Rosie, we have collected the perspective from the Parliament, the perspective from the Council, the perspective on the Brussels effect from the Commission and Katherine Forrest as well. Vice President Kaili, now we would like maybe a perspective more on the future-proofness of enforcement. Like, do you think how can we ensure the rules are enforceable in light of like fast evolving capabilities and business models of these in the technologies that are covered by the AI Act? How can we future-proof the enforcement of the AI Act?
Thank you, Nicolas, for actually your comments and presentation, and all the speakers, because I'm like taking so many notes here. I felt we were close to finish with AI, but it seems not. But so maybe I should touch upon some points to reach a conclusion and a response to what you're asking. So I think to be able to have an enforceable AI and to be future-proof, we need to have a definition that it's not going to limit us. You mentioned neural networks, and I said super intelligence. It would reach a point where we cannot even understand the results or the processes from deep learning. So I think it has to be an open definition. I think also that the US could follow EU, because we have troubled ourselves with how we're going to do that. So we're following the OECD actually definition. And this allows us to follow the technology and make sure that we will adapt constantly. So there are no IP rights. I mean, everybody can take that, and it's better to help us to stay aligned. Also, we don't try to regulate the tech, so we don't regulate AI. So AI can change, can develop. We have neural networks. It can be super intelligence or whatever. We are regulating the uses, and that's why I agree with Eva when she says, I mean, okay, per sector we have to be more careful because there is more risk in health or mobility. But definitely use cases, you cannot have the same for applications that we just say, I mean, some habits, nutrition in our health, or some applications that make decisions of like, very important for our lives. So I think also this classification, it's going to be flexible. So we can add or remove whatever is included, depending on how we can test it, or if we have sandboxes that they provide us with strong, results, then we can also decide, to change our approach. But it will give us a roadmap, and that's why I also agree that we have to wait for this US-EU. Werner mentioned that global standards is the next thing. So we have a definition that the global standards. I think we cannot only look at the like-minded partners, we have to look beyond that. I mean, we have to develop real global standards. I mean, it's more easy with like-minded partners to set up and join forces. We are a market of 500 million citizens, so we can influence our partners. But we have to at least start from one level and present some basic standards at least. Then, of course, I mean, of course, the law, you have to have competent authorities. We talk about the EU board on AI. Maybe we need, in the end, an agency, because, I mean, it's not easy to get the right people, and we do have that for cybersecurity, for example, and then we can give them the possibility to develop also in-house services to understand how AI can maybe create more challenges. For example, lip recognition. I mean, do we ban it or not? Should we have an in-house developed application where we can have some like defense to autonomous weapons? Should we be able to understand the technology so that we can protect our citizens from its misuse? So I think it would be necessary at some point to have all our experts coming together, because you also mentioned lack of digital skills. And this means that as governments, yes, we can provide some stability for people to work with us, but I mean, the companies, they give them like huge salaries. So the excellence that we need, we have to be very engaged that we're going to keep it to work for the benefit of the citizens. And then to have the foresight, I think we have a kind of foresight. I mean, we analyze a lot of emerging technologies and their potential. And this is why I have to mention another file, which is so interesting and very geopolitical, the CHIPS Act, because this is going to the infrastructure, and it says what? Okay, let's say we have AI, but then we don't have the sensors for AI. Why? Because they are developed in Taiwan, and something happens and we don't have the access, a pandemic, a lockdown, let's don't go to the worst scenarios. But then we need to be stronger linked in this huge global chain of not just being 12% or 13% of the global production, but we need to do more, to have more leverage, to be more independent, especially in very important sectors. And she's working on that. This means it would release a dynamic of 43, at least, billion of investments. I think we need to do even more, and we will have to. We don't have the choice to say we can fail. we have to make it succeed, and this would require even more funding and support from member states. So I think this was part of our foresight, and this is why it was in the working program even before we realized there are delays of, I mean, you're ordering a car now, it comes, I don't know, in 1 year or 2, but then the sensors and the touchscreen comes later. So this is like already disrupted. This shows we need more raw materials. We need to invest in synthetic materials. So foresight means not just to predict all these scenarios, but also to act, to be proactive, to be future-proof. And I think this is our responsibility now. We're doing quite well. When I was talking about, I mean, US and profit is because I know that when I talk to our transatlantic partners, they are very hesitant or resistant to the regulations we are discussing. It's not because we really like to have a lot of GDPR effect, but I mean, we want to do things with quality and respect of our values, and this is a priority. So maybe we will not lead, maybe we will not have the most unicorns globally, but we have a best quality of life for our citizens, and we know that they will feel safe and they will have access to healthcare, and things that they are not for granted in other countries, they will be for granted here. So I do hope we can manage to have, I mean, a great collaboration once you overcome the last parts of it, and work to the rest of the files that can complement also the use of AI, I mean, the infrastructures of supply chains. And then just a final point, because I just remembered, we talk about all these things and then we say, okay, let's bring also digitalization to Africa so we can develop and we can discuss. And I talk with them and they say, yes, first we need to have energy infrastructures to achieve, we don't have internet, we don't have connectivity. So there are some steps we need to take to make sure it's future-proof, and we need to understand the global and the geopolitical aspect of it. So I think this would make us more future-proof if we stop looking, on how to do things, but like how we are so interconnected that we need to become more autonomous.
Thank you. Actually, I think this is horizon scanning is in some of the amendments that are suggested for the AI Act right now, right? Like the European AI board would be in charge of like having some form of a trend analysis, or like looking at emerging trends in AI and facilitating also landscape mapping and that kind of thing. So there is hope. And of course, yeah, the regulatory sandboxes will be a great tool to learn that. I mean, if they pass, oh my God, all right.
At the European level, we have to not have 27 different laws. We have to have EU possibility, and we have to test it.
A harmonized approach, for sure. Actually, like this brings me to the poll, the regulatory sandboxes, and I'd like to have like your each panelist reactions to each other or to today's results. The poll of the online. And then I will have to bring this panel to a close, unfortunately. But like, I'd love to hear the views of everyone. Like, basically, the online audience seems to think that like the most crucial element for the enforcement of the AI Act is the European AI board, or a strong EU-level coordination. Then the risk classification with clear categories tied with like cooperative international development, enforcement. Sorry. We then have like. Basically, this is a tied place in the middle with like audit, investigative power, standardization, and benchmarking. And then at the bottom, we have the direct complaint procedures for citizen is the least crucial in the list there. And then the regulatory sandboxes is the absolutely least crucial. Maybe this is the Brussels.
I think one of the rapporteurs has hijacked the order and asked people to vote.
Yes, go for it. Like, please. I'd be curious to hear each panelist's, impression of what is the most crucial element, maybe beyond even those that are listed here. What is the most crucial element that we really should not get wrong? In order to get an enforceable AI Act. Quickly, I don't know if maybe Werner, can I start with you?
Of course, yeah. I would agree actually with the two things that come first. I may not necessarily agree with what comes last, yeah. But I mean, the first is strong EU-level coordination, and I think coordination is an important word here because we don't necessarily say EU-level enforcement and everything just comes from Brussels, but really working together, making, have experts exchange ideas and knowledge, probably create infrastructures to tap into capacities as others may not have. So that is very important. I would probably add to that, it's not just cooperation between member states, but also cooperation within member states. And this was also mentioned that we have lots of different laws now where you may need very similar expertise. And as our American panelist has said, these skills are scarce in the public sector in particular. But we need people, on algorithmic transparency, on the DSA, in the DMA. We need data scientists for the Data Act and for the Data Governance Act. And we need all of that in the AI Act. And since those experts don't grow on trees, not yet, so I think also at the member state level, you must make sure that somehow you connect the dots and you get most of the synergies out of that. And then, of course, with the other member states. So coordination all over the place. Second comment on the second priority, this clarity, clear categories, it's super important, of course. We cannot enforce something that is unclear. And that means it is clear what the requirements are. If I'm a company or an administration that wants to comply, I need to know what I have to comply with. And it has to be feasible on top of it. It has to be specific enough to be complied with. It has to be feasible. It has to be clear. And then I can do my best to comply and others can do their best to try to enforce compliance. So for me, I would fully subscribe to those first two. But I do like sandboxing.
All right. Well, thank you. Mrs. Forrest, would you like to comment, like from your perspective?
Yes, I'm going to do the option of none of the above and add my own. I think that, and taking this from a perspective not only of it succeeding within the EU, but also more globally, that there needs to be public and private, what I'm going to call buy-in. And the buy-in, I think, comes in two forms. It comes in acceptance of what needs to be done and agreement to do it. And so I think there needs to be a public-private sort of coordination and acceptance, particularly by the private sector. Otherwise, there's going to be resistance, and that causes friction, and it becomes very difficult.
All right, yeah, thank you. That's a very good point, one of the fundamentals, I guess. Juraj, what's your perspective on this? Maybe you have your own ideas to add to the list, by the way, since you have worked so much on that.
Well, as regards the priority that the audience has chosen, which is the joint facility on the EU level, I would like to stress here that we should not over-legalize the topic. In other words, it is not that important whether the facility will have its own legal personality, whether it will be a new agency, whatsoever. We should first closely analyze the capabilities we need and then decide about the form that we can create in order to make sure that these rules are applied effectively, seamlessly, and that we are even able to respond to incidents and situations that may require a fast response. So that's my remark as regards the first priority. And also, when designing these cooperation tools, creating joint teams, etc., we need to look at the lessons learned. And we now have already the medical device regulation being enforced for a couple of years. And we can already see that there's a problem with the capacities, and that may even result in shortages and bottlenecks. If there is not enough people and enough capacities put into the checks and assessments, can face a situation that we certainly would not wish to have, because we need people to be inventive, we need people to do business, and still also to protect the population. As regards the second priority, the clear classification of high risk, here I would strongly plead for flexibility. Of course, we need to make sure that this is clear, that everyone knows whether the system is being regulated or not. It is extremely important, of course, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we can respond to new knowledge, to new situations. And if we pass the legislation, the next revision could take place in the next decade. Of course, there's the possibility for the delegated acts, etc., but we might not catch all that is ahead of us, right? So that's very important to bear in mind, that it was stressed that the AI today may be very different from what AI will be even in 3 years, when the rules may start to apply. And as regards the sandboxes, the last one on the list, they are very important. And it will be also a big challenge to build them under the auspices of the public institutions, as it is now envisaged in the draft. We need to make sure that people who want to create inventions, that they have these experimental places where they can be guided into compliance, and that we provide them with a lot of support and understanding. And there we can also learn important lessons from the fintech, because they were ahead of us even for years, right? They were the front runners. So there's some lessons learned to be learned in the fintech as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And actually, like one of the next panels will be also about future-proofing the AI Act. That's going to be a very interesting discussion as well. Mrs. Maydell, what's your perspective on this? Like, please save the regulatory sandbox.
Thank you so much once again. I'll be very brief. First of all, I mean, looking at now all the options that you've given, it makes a lot of sense that the first one emerges as a strong EU-level coordination. How exactly that would be done is to be defined and to be seen, but I think it makes a lot of sense when we speak about enforcement. And also the second one, risk classification with clear categories. I mean, this is what I also answered to you in my previous response. But to me, when it comes to regulatory sandboxes or international cooperation in general, that's the 9th option when it comes to enforcement, but I would put it in a bit more general terms, is absolutely key to enhance our innovation and possibility for AI to be nurtured here in Europe. So they might not be vital for the enforcement in Europe, but they're absolutely vital for a thriving ecosystem. And this is why I very much hope that our expanded proposition from the ITRE committee will find itself in the final text.
All right, thank you very much. And so, Vice President Kaili, you have the final words for this panel as we are wrapping up and closing down now. Thank you so much.
I will agree. I think it is quite wise, the result, because it talks about basically the need to understand who is responsible, the responsibility, so like the authorities to be able to be there and to collaborate and, you know, strengthen each other, because it's not like GDPR where you react. Here you have to have also during the whole life cycle of an AI system, monitoring possibilities. And this is not easy, because it develops. I mean, an AI system can start today and like in a year be completely different. So we cannot just react. And then for the risks, of course, I mean, people, when you talk about AI, I mean, the first roundtable, I remember everybody was, I'm afraid that, I'm worried that. I mean, everybody talking about AI, they were starting by their being concerned because they felt that it would like take control and it would replace us, not complement us. So we have to decide what are the uses we will ban, the harmful uses that lead to inequalities or exclusion. Not everybody is connected. We have to give them options. We have to keep it complementary to benefit people. And the third, I think, it's actually the result. So when you're afraid and when you need the responsibility, then you also need to feel trust. And this means you need to test it. So I think this would convince people that their thinking will not be manipulated. This is included. I mean, it's not allowed. This means if there is a things can go wrong, of course, but if you test it, then at least the intention is not there. The intention is to respect our principles and values. And that's why I think the private sector will have also to follow what we decide, because it's not just maximizing the profit with an AI system, is making sure there is a balance and people will feel that it actually benefits them. And this is like the gold balance we need to strike in Europe with this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vice President Kaili, and to all our panelists. Please join me in providing a big round of applause. And Nicolas.